Hello everybody, Mr. Sticksman here, and welcome back to Stormworks. In today's video, we've got two jobs to do on the Alpha Z. The first one is to improve the steering, and the second one is to build a microcontroller for our throttle, which is going to make this boat a lot more realistic. Let's get on with it. What we're going to do with the rudder is limit how much it turns, because if you remember, it was turning a full 90 degrees and therefore just slowing us down and not actually turning at all. If we just demonstrate that here. So look at that, the rudder that's ridiculous, isn't it? 90-degree angle. But what we actually want is approximately like this kind of angle, except right now I'm having to keep pressing D or A on the other side. I have to keep tapping it in order to keep it in that position, otherwise it goes too far or not far enough. So we're going to limit it to half of the potential of the hinge at least, so 0.5 probably, and we'll see if that works. Now to do that, we're going to get a function block, alright, and that is here. Okay, a function with one input, that's all we need for this rudder, okay? So if we just put this, we'll just choose a place for it for now. We can put it down here, for example. Okay. Now, instead of A and D going straight into this hinge, what we're going to do is put it into the function block and then into the hinge. So we'll come in here and we're going to do X times 0.5. Okay, so that is essentially halving, or it should at least halve, the angle that this rudder or hinge here will turn. Okay, so let's go and check it out now. We'll test it and see if that's worked. And look at that, I'm just holding down D now, and it's not going any further than that. Now, of course, we could have it go to 0.6, for example. That might be better. But again, if we just test this, and hopefully it's going to give us a much better result. So I'm just going to hold down, if we go left, let's try left. Okay, just going to hold down A, and look at that, it's turning really nicely, but it's holding a nice lean as well, which is really good. That's brilliant. Quite a good turning circle actually. I'm pretty impressed by that. Making it much more effective. We'll try the other way as well, which will probably be exactly the same, of course. There we go. Lovely. Alright, that job is now done. Let's take it back in and work on our throttle. Okay, now this throttle controller is going to be quite sort of a bit more advanced than the key one here. There's a bit more involved because there's, of course, a lot going on. It's going to be controlling not only the engine throttle, but also it's controlling the clutch and the gearbox at the same time. So first of all, we're going to use the select tool here, go into our throttle lever, and we're going to actually change how this works here. So we're going to start at 0, okay? So as far as this is concerned, we're not applying any throttle. It's going to be in the neutral position, okay, so not in gear, essentially. Then the maximum value is going to be 1, and the minimum value, just for now, is going to be -1, okay? So that's what we're going to do. -1, 1, and then 0. And that's it. And in fact, I will actually just reduce the sensitivity here so it's easier to control. But it doesn't, really matter. It's just so I can just do some fine adjustments there if I want to. Okay, lovely. So now that's done, we can actually go and start making our microcontroller for this thing. And we're going to be aiming for a forward gear, a neutral position, and then a reverse gear as well. Okay, let's get going. Okay then, so let's go into our microcontroller editor here and start making it. Now, first of all, let's call this the Alpha Z throttle controller, like that. Okay, I'm not quite sure how big it's going to be. Now, I normally try to keep my microcontrollers either 1 or 3 wide so that I can sit them, in the middle of the boat, and therefore the weight is balanced and it's nicely positioned very centrally and hopefully low down as well. So that's why I've done this. But let's go into logic here and start adding the nodes. Okay, now first of all, what we're going to want is an input for a number, because a number from our throttle is going to go into the controller, and then it's going to be sort of, worked out mathematically and sent out the other end into the engine. So we are dealing with largely numbers here. Okay, so let's have a number input, and we'll just call it throttle, like that. Okay, and we're also going to have an output, which is a number as well. So that's the one that's going into the engine. Okay, like this. So we'll just separate them. Very nice. And then finally, my symbol is probably going to be something like AZ throttle or something like that. And there's my throttle symbol there. So that's hopefully going to enable us to find it quicker. Now let's go into logic. And I think that's going to be enough just for now. There is one issue that we have to overcome here, which is on the throttle lever, we have positive numbers and negative numbers as well, because we're going either side of 0, positive or negative, okay? Which is what we want. However, if we go into reverse gear, we also want to apply positive throttle, of course. We want to actually have throttle going if we're below 0. But at the moment, it won't do that because it thinks it's negative, and therefore it doesn't want to apply any throttle. And so there is a logic gate here which turns anything negative, any negative numbers, into positive numbers, and it keeps positive as well. So either way, if the throttle is telling us to go negative or positive, it's always going to give us a positive numerical value which can go into our engine. And that logic gate is the ABS gate. Okay, and so as it says, outputs the absolute value of the input value, negative numbers become positive. Okay, that is a really, really important step here. Otherwise, this throttle system won't work at all. So let's put that up here. And actually, there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen down here as well. So if I just put that up there and keep it out of the way for now. But that can actually go straight into our engine, all right? So now it's always going to receive a positive value whether we are either side of 0. But there is one extra thing we're going to add here, because of course if we start the engine and it's on 0 throttle, it's just not going to start because it needs throttle to start ticking over, right? So we're actually going to add a clamp here in between ABS and engine as well. And what the clamp is actually going to do is just give the engine a value to run at, okay? When no throttle is applied at all, when the throttle's sitting at 0, it's at least going to have a certain amount of throttle just to keep running so it doesn't cut off. And so our clamp is going to be, I'm going to set this for now at 0.10, and essentially it's going to allow the throttle to go between those two values, but not less than that. And so it's going to hopefully stay running. Again, after testing, if this doesn't work, if this is not enough or it's too much, we can adjust it to keep that engine running. But those sorts of things we have to do testing for to figure it out. So hopefully that makes sense as well. But now let's move on to the next stage. There are more nodes to add now because we are going to have to control the clutch and the gearbox. So let's go back into here. And we are going to add another number output, okay, because that's going to be going to the clutch. So we've got that one, so we'll just move that over there. And yes, we are going to have to extend this actually. There we go. And we're also going to want an on-off node for the gearbox because it's either on or off as it switches between the two ratios, okay. So let's put that gearbox down there. All right, and we'll just put that node over there. Back into logic we go then. Now, the reason why we've got a clutch node here is because if, we're not actually using a clutch controller, it's going to be doing it automatically depending on what our throttle lever is doing, okay? So it's going to have to talk to the throttle lever, and that's why the clutch node is here. So what are we going to put in between to allow it to talk, and also the gearbox as well? Because if it just changed into reverse when the value went below 0, but there was no clutch, the engine's going to stall, of course, because there's no sort of easy transition for the engine. It's going to be too much hard work for it, and so yeah, it will just stall and it will cut off. And so to stop the engine stalling when we go into reverse, that's why we've got this clutch control. And essentially, when the throttle is neutral, okay, the clutch is disengaged, if that's how you say it. So it's not in gear, basically. The engine is not in gear, it's just running freely. And then if you push the throttle lever forwards, it's going to engage the clutch, and the boat will go forwards, the propeller will start spinning. Then you take it back to 0, the clutch disengages and it's free again. And then if you move the throttle lever back into the negative numbers, it's going to increase our throttle still, our engine throttle here, the value, okay? But it's going to change the gear into reverse and therefore, and also engage the clutch as well, and therefore it's going to send us backwards. Hopefully that makes sense anyway, but that's what we're about to set up here. Now, we want to have a few thresholds here because the throttle is then going to send a value into the threshold, so we just find that here. And depending on which threshold we are in, it's then going to tell what comes after them what to do. So for example, let's get 3 thresholds here because we have forwards, neutral and reverse, okay? Now let's just say, just for now, this is 0, okay? So when the throttle is exactly in the middle, then it's going to tell the clutch to disengage, alright? So that's going to be over there. If this is between, let's say, 0.01 and 1, then we're going to go forwards. And if it's between negative 0.01 and negative 1, then the engine is, well, it's going to make us go backwards essentially, okay? So we've got forwards, neutral and reverse. Now these numbers, they are going to change a bit, but I've just done it like that for now to show you guys that is generally how it's going to work, okay? But there are some issues with this, and that's why we're going to actually change these numbers a bit later on. Now, here's our clutch control then, and technically we're actually going to want this threshold and this threshold talk to the clutch, right? Because it wants to engage whether we're going forwards or backwards, okay? So first of all, let's put the throttle into all of these. Okay, so now the throttle is talking to these thresholds and it's going to go from there. The gearbox, of course. Now, just ordinarily, the boat is already using ratio 1 on the gearbox. So we don't have to change gear to go forwards, okay? It's just ratio 1, which is forwards, or ratio 2, which is reverse. So we don't need to have 2 gearbox things here. We just need 1 for reverse because we're only changing it into reverse, or otherwise it just falls anyway. So how then do we actually tell these thresholds to send their signals over here? Well, first of all, we're going to get some switch boxes, okay? We need 2 of those. So we're going to use the numerical switch box here. We're going to have one up there, and then another one just down here to try and keep it nice and even if we can. Okay, now this is an on-off node, of course. So what it's going to do is send its signal into this switch box, okay? And then we can, you know, send it to the clutch or whatever as well. And also this one down here is going to talk to this one as well. This one can also hook up into the gearbox because essentially if the throttle is between negative 0.01 and negative 1, it's going to send us into reverse gear, okay? But at the same time, it has to control the clutch with it, otherwise it's going to stall. And so that's why we're going to have this switch box here as well. Let's have a constant number for each of these switch boxes because we need to give a value to the clutch, otherwise it doesn't know what to do. So we're going to put that constant number there and have another one up there. So essentially, when the switch box is switched on here with this threshold, okay, that switches it on or off. So if it's on, we want to give the clutch a full 1 value, and that means that the clutch will fully engage, okay? So put 1 into there. Now we don't need to actually hook up anything here because if you put nothing into this node here, it just thinks it's 0, which is fine. So if the throttle value is not within 0.01 and 1 here, then the switch box will be off and therefore it will just count the clutch value here as 0, okay? So I hope that does make sense for you guys. But we're also going to just apply this one as well, of course. And this is also going to be 1 over here. Again, it's exactly the same. It's just a clutch controller as well. No difference there, okay? But we've got 2 of these things here. Now, the way we're going to add these together, because whether we're in forwards or reverse, I mean, if we just do this, right, you'll see that you can't actually just hook up 2 different numerical nodes or values to the same input there, the clutch, right? It only chooses one or the other. But the way we're going to do this is combine them and then send the signal into the clutch. So we're going to add, literally an add gate, okay? So an add gate will just combine the 2 numerical values here, okay? And send it through into the clutch. Simple as that. I hope that makes sense. But it's, that's literally all it is doing, all right? Now, at the moment, the clutch is working in a very sort of simple way. It's just sort of moving on or off, all right? But if we want to have a bit of extra control over that and have it talking to the threshold here, which is for neutral, in between forwards and backwards, we're going to want to add an up-down counter as well, okay? So let's just move this over here a bit. And we're going to go for an up-down counter. There we are. Now this thing here is, as it says, has an internal value that will increase and decrease when receiving different signals. So you can actually have a bit of control over how quickly or how sort of gently the clutch is going to apply itself. If the clutch applies really, really quickly, it could lead to stalling the engine, or if it's too slow, the engine could stall as well, because we need to allow the clutch enough time to disengage and then re-engage to go into reverse or forwards or whatever. But yeah, if those values are not right, the engine's going to get a bit caught out here, and it's going to end up sort of running into a bit of trouble. So let's put the up-down counter down here. What we actually want to do is connect the up-down counter into the clutch. So there we have control over, how it's performing essentially. And also, at the same time, where do we put this add now? Well, here we go. Here's how we're going to connect these up. We're going to use a greater than logic gate, okay? So essentially, let's put that into A there. Okay, so essentially, when the value from the thresholds here is greater than 0, these are both positive values, okay? So when they're greater than 0, one of these 2 things here, it's going to then tell the up-down counter to send an up signal into the clutch, okay? And if the value is 0, then the clutch will disengage, essentially, all right? Let's say this is 0. We're not going to plug anything into B, okay? That's just 0, and this is A. So A is when A is greater than B, which it will be all the time as long as we're in forwards or reverse, okay? It's going to apply the clutch, all right? Now, here is how neutral is also going to tie into this, because if we're at 0, as we can see here, okay, the throttle is exactly in the middle. It's not in forwards or reverse. It's just in neutral. Therefore, we're going to join that threshold up for the reset on the up-down counter. So that's going to reset the clutch to 0, okay? And therefore, when we're in neutral, the engine's not going to stall because just no gears are applied because the clutch is not engaged, and therefore the engine can keep ticking over in neutral quite happily, and it hopefully won't stall. Now, I believe that is the entire controller done. However, there's a few numbers here that we need to adjust. And the first value that we're going to adjust is the clutch here, well, with the up-down counter, okay? So we're going to go and use the clamp, all right? And the minimum is going to be 0.2 and the maximum is going to be 1. So let me explain that though. Basically, the clutch is always going to be at least engaged at 0.2. Now, as far as I know, and things might have changed, but in Stormworks, the clutch takes a bit of value input before it actually engages. So even if you apply a bit of clutch here with 0.2, it's still not actually going to be engaged. It's just nearly engaged. It's closer to being engaged. Now that is just as far as I know, so please do let me know in the comments if you think differently. But from my testing, this has worked perfectly, and the propeller does not spin when it's not engaged. So it should be fine. But the reason why I've done this is so that the clutch can actually engage quicker, because it's only got to travel 0.8, right, from 0.2 to 1. So it's not having to travel the full range. I've shortened that range that it needs to do to get to the maximum engaged value. I don't know how much of a difference this is really going to make, but I think it should help a bit and just prevent us, hopefully, from stalling to some degree. And then finally on this up-down counter here, to make the transition for the clutch a bit smoother, I'm going to decrease the increments here. So I'm going to just, for now, put 0.01, okay? That might be too little, but essentially it's going to slow down how quickly the clutch engages. And therefore our takeoff will be a bit less jolty, because if it was 1, probably when the clutch applies it's going to suddenly sort of lurch forwards, and it might even do a backflip if we got too much power applied. So that should prevent that, but again we can change these things after testing as well. Okay, but that's done for now. So now we're going to head back over here and just adjust these values too, because the neutral, right, now we are going to have to be very accurate with our throttle, because at the moment, we're only going to be in neutral if we are exactly on 0 with our throttle, which of course we're controlling by hand, right? So we've got to be super accurate there, but we can make that a bit easier. We can have a bit of a dead zone here, if you like. So if I want neutral to be anything where the throttle lever is in between, for example, 0.15, okay, and negative 0.15 as well. So if the throttle lever is anywhere in between these two values, we're going to be in neutral. The clutch will not engage. So if we knock it slightly by mistake when we want to be in neutral, it's still, you know, chances are we're not going to engage the clutch and stall the engine. But if we go beyond these two values, that's when we're either going to have forwards or reverse engage, and actually we're going to then start moving. So to work with this, in fact, what we're going to do is put that to 1.4 and that to 1.4 as well, okay? And then we're going to keep this at 0.15 and that at 0.15 or negative 0.15 as well. I do hope that makes sense, but essentially when the throttle lever goes beyond 0.14 into 0.15, it's going to engage this on off in the switch box here, apply a 1 value into the clutch, you know, with these extra values to help it out, and therefore we're going to start going forwards here. And then the same in reverse, it's exactly the same actually, but we're dealing with a few negative numbers, as well as we're actually switching the gearbox ratio into reverse. Now with all that being done, I think that is all we need to do. So let's just save this thing here, hook it all up to the right components, spawn in the boat and give it a test. Right, so here's the boat then waiting for that microcontroller to be installed. So we'll just go back and search for Alpha Z, and there is our throttle controller. So it's quite a bit bigger than the other one, but it's not huge. So we'll put it like this, and that's why I like them to be 1 wide, just so that we can, you know, nicely just sit it in the middle. And again, I might move them eventually, but just for now, that works pretty well there, doesn't it? So we'll head into here, and hopefully I've labelled everything correctly. We can just hook them all up. So this one goes into the engine. Okay. We have, now that's the throttle. So the throttle lever here goes into the controller there. Then it's sending the signal to the engine. The clutch as well. So there is the clutch. So we don't have to actually control that by hand anymore. It's all going to be automatic with any luck. And then here's the gearbox control as well, okay? And just to check our ratios here, ratio 2 is reverse, so that's fine. And positive is, well, 5.2, you know, that's going to be adjusted further down the line. But it should just work for now. We're going to go forwards, basically. Hopefully, anyway. Has everything got power before we go into the water? Yes, I believe it does. Let's spawn this thing in and hope that it actually works. Right, here we go then, the moment of truth. Now, we can just about see there the throttle is at 0. But if we start the key, we should notice that actually it's going to have throttle applied through the microcontroller. If you remember, we had, I think it was 0.15. Yeah. So anyway, let's turn the key here, and it's working. The engine is running. Right, now let's try and apply some throttle and see if it works. We're going. Clutch is engaged. Fantastic. So I might need to increase the revs actually of the engine. I mean, it performed alright, didn't it? It didn't stall. So literally, right, we're essentially using this throttle lever alone to control the clutch and the gearbox and the throttle value at the same time. So it's only sort of like one button that does all, really, isn't it? It's very, very nice and simple. But that's great, we didn't stall. It's also working very, very well there. Now let's try though, we're going to go back down to 0. And actually, we can see the propeller here is spinning. If we go to 0. What was the cutoff? 0.14 or 0.13, like that, the propeller should stop spinning over time. It will just slow down gradually, but it should completely stop. There we go. It's really going slowly now, if you can see that. And in a minute, it should just cut out because we are now on tickover. The engine should still be running. However, the clutch should not be engaged at all. It looks like it's still moving a bit. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it is definitely slowing down, and eventually that will just stop completely. But the engine is still running because the exhausts are going. Fantastic. Now let's just jam it into reverse, and hopefully we'll go backwards. Here we go. Oh, it's working. Hang on. We're going really fast. We're going really fast in reverse. But look at that. It's working. Try some turning in reverse as well, because I actually haven't done any reversing in this boat before. Oh, okay, it's a bit risky. So what we can do now is actually reduce the amount of power it uses in reverse, because, you know, you never need like a lot of power in reverse. It's just for maneuverability, isn't it? So we'll never be going this quick. Oh my goodness, I can't see anything. I can't see. Let's try 0.2. How's that? That's actually perfect, isn't it? That's all we need for reverse speed. Lovely. Now let's try and jam it into forwards really quickly and see if it stalls or not. Go. I might have just stalled it. Yeah, I think I have just stalled it. So let's put it into 0 again. Now we can do some more adjusting with the numbers, of course. Right. Now let's restart it and see if this works again, if it's reset properly. So what we should see here is, if I increase my throttle to, let's say 0.1, or the propeller shouldn't actually be moving, because even though we've got some throttle applied, and it is moving a bit there, even though the engine's off. But if we just start it, there we go, engines are firing up. But the clutch is not engaged, even though we have a bit of throttle applied there. Forwards, and it's working again. I think really how it's set up right now is that if we don't want to stall the engine, we just have to be a little bit sensitive with how this is going to work. So if we just want to go in reverse, slow down a bit, gradually put it, and you can see we're now going backwards. So I don't know how gentle we have to be, but at least it works, and we can improve the system from here. Well, that worked. I think because we had more revs, basically. We had more engine revs, and so when I jammed it right from reverse into forwards, it didn't actually stall the engine. That's awesome. That's so cool. Alright, I am happy with that. And then we'll try the engine cut off here as we get back into the dock. There we go, and it's cut off. Fantastic. Okay, but that is all we've got time for in this video. That's a lot of work that we've just done right there, and I think my brain's going to explode if I try and do any more right now. But there is more work to be done, of course, and we will continue with this boat in future videos. So, of course, we need to hook up the dials there in front of me on the dash so we can get the temperatures and the fuel gauge and speed and all that sort of stuff. And also we might be able to fine-tune the steering a bit. We can also perhaps fine-tune the numbers in these microcontrollers from today, you know, and just see how that works. I am also planning, right, on trying to add some trim tabs back here, because the real boat does have trim and it helps it to sort of plane and go faster and stay level at speed. And so I am going to add those in the next video and test them out and just see you know, and see what happens with that. But thank you so much for watching, everybody. Take care, and hopefully see you all very, very soon. Bye, guys.